Um, there are a lot of issues I care about, but today I wanted to just highlight four that have really occupied my time since I've been on council. First, of course, we have COVID recovery. Since we've been here, during my entire time on council, and indeed during most of the campaign, COVID had had kind of changed our world. Since I've been on council, that's been job number one. We've been focused on trying to get vaccines into people's arms. We've been focused on trying to keep people housed, and especially keeping mom and pop landlords whole. And especially as vaccines have gotten out there, we've also been doing everything that we can to reopen our economy and our public spaces. A second issue I care about and work awfully hard on, and this work actually began when I was over at Historic Parkrose, is public safety. I'm focused as we spend, I'm sure, half of our day trying to build a better public safety system. For me, that means building a public safety system that's both fairer and which keeps people safe. So examples of things we're doing in that realm deal with trying to stand up a new system of citizens-led police oversight. We are renegotiating the contract with the police union, and we're working closely with the Federal Justice Department to make sure the police bureau is adhering to some of the best practices around public safety issues. And we're also, of course, working on trying to keep Portlanders safer. As you all know, gun violence in our city has exploded in the last year and a half. Probably, Parkrose has been impacted by that, as you all know, probably as much as any neighborhood in the city. We're doing our best to be good partners to you on that. Some of the things that we've done in order to make the city safer is in our last budget, which actually was my first budget since I've been on council, we actually added funds to hire more police officers. And we've also reorganized the police department to get officers from working behind desk and out there on the streets. So even though our police department has been shrinking, we've actually been able to get more cops in cars. And I'm awfully proud of that. Specifically on gun violence, and I know out in Parkrose, I'm still on listservs and social media groups in Parkrose, so I know that all of you hear gunfire far too often. And one of the things that we've done to address that is we've created a new police unit that specifically focuses in on gun crime. And in addition to that, we've made some significant new investments in violence prevention programs. The third problem that I've been focused on is houselessness. Again, I know this issue touches Parkrose deeply. Back when I was out at Historic Parkrose, I did an awful lot of work trying to address houselessness in your community, especially along the slough. We have some exciting and I think important new developments happening there. You have probably heard that the city is in the process of setting up 6 new managed camps for houseless people. That'll help, I hope, get hundreds of people off the streets, and we should see the first of those come online literally in a matter of weeks. Since I've been in council, we've also passed laws that make it easier for nonprofit groups to set up houseless shelters. So if you know of a nonprofit or a church group that wants to set up a little shelter, it's much easier to do that today than it was even 6 months ago. And we've also importantly passed new rules which define the spaces where houseless folks are not allowed to camp. So one of the things I'm particularly proud of since we've been here is we passed an ordinance which makes it illegal to camp adjacent to a school or a hospital or within 10 feet of the entrance to a building. That is important work, which I hope will make the city more livable. And the last issue that I wanted to highlight today in terms of things that I work on a day-to-day basis is the environment. As the commissioner in charge of the Water Bureau and Environmental Services, I play a special role in protecting the city's drinking water and rivers. Um, One of the things that I'm doing that is going to make a big difference there is I'm working with the Water Bureau to build a new water filtration plant, which will ensure that future generations of Portlanders have clean, safe drinking water. And in addition to that, over at Environmental Services, we're about to launch a major cleanup of the Willamette River, which will leave that river cleaner than it has been in 100 years. That'll be an amazing legacy, which will benefit both our generation and generations to come. There are more issues that we're focused on, including some of the challenges that are specific to Parkrose. And that was the real initiative for why I wanted to reach out today and have a conversation with you. As a person who spent an awful lot of time over at Rossi Farms doing movie nights and street fairs and fun runs, it very much broke my heart to see the violence that happened in what I think is a really special neighborhood, and certainly as a neighborhood that's really special to me. And I have a lot to say about that. But before I dive into that, I think it might make sense for me to actually open up the floor to hear what you have to say and see if you have any specific questions for me about the incident out on 122nd, or any other issues that you care about. And with that, why don't we start to take some questions?
Yeah, and just a reminder for folks, if you didn't see it in the chat or you missed the verbal intros in the beginning, if you can raise your hand using the Zoom feature, there should be a button that you can click to raise your hand, or you can message me directly. And we will start with Annette.
Great, thank you, Yvette. So Mingus, when I was working with you when you were at Historic Parkrose, I learned about crime prevention through environmental design. And I was wondering if you have talked to the mayor or any of the other commissioners about any public process for the Kmart parking lot and the whole Kmart site. It's actually been a source of nuisance activity even before this incident. And people have lots of great ideas. I've heard about, international market or community space, community center. So if there's anything that you can do to help along those lines, I'd like to hear about it.
Absolutely. The Kmart was part of my portfolio back when I was at Historic Parkrose. When I was there, one of the things I did was spent an awful lot of time trying to keep that space safe. We had problems, back then we had problems with campers and litter and all the associated crimes that come with that. I've talked with community groups about trying to reactivate that space. And I've talked to Prosper Portland about what we can do there too. Those discussions continue. One of the challenges in terms of bringing Prosper Portland in is that they're in this transition space where they use tax increment fund. Essentially, Prosper Portland and some of our urban renewal zones out there, including the Historic Parkrose Urban Renewal Zone, will sunset relatively soon, in a matter of a couple of years. I forget what your date is, Annette. But one of the things I'm pressing Prosper Portland to do is to renew the urban renewal zone out in Historic Parkrose. We actually have some funds to promote some development. And I think that they are committed to doing that. So that's news. And you'll have a good partner there. There's long-term challenges there, working with the particular owner of that building, which I have found, frankly, to be challenging. And then there's the challenge of trying to find partners and opportunities there. So in the short term, one of the things I'd like to do is and I'm glad you talked about crime prevention and CPTED's, crime prevention through environmental design, is work with the community to see if there's some specific things that we can do to try to keep that space clean. When I was there, we experimented with trying to get security, like somehow funding security guards to go through and patrol that space. I'm not sure if we can do something around fences or whatnot in the short term, but long term, it's my goal to see new development, specifically in the Kmart parking lot. I see Prosper Portland, or in the Kmart property. I see Prosper Portland as being Prosper Portland as being an important partner there. But things remain sort of in limbo. One of the questions is there going to be a Prosper Portland? And if there's going to be a Prosper Portland, they're going to be in Parkrose. So that much I think we can reassure you. But we don't have specific plans, but I can commit to you to be a partner to help figure out how to make that work, both in on the short term in terms of just keeping that space safe, and then long term in terms of actually getting something developed there that'll revitalize the neighborhood.
Okay, the next person in queue is Jacqueline McGinnis. And then from there, we'll go to Marcy and Dr. Paula. So Jacqueline, are you still here?
Yes, I'm right here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've lived in this neighborhood about 15 years. I graduated from Parkrose High in 2010. I've worked for several businesses right down here, kind of in the west side of the neighborhood, up to about Gateway area. Right now I'm at the Parkrose Shell over there. So I meet a lot of people in the community. I form relationships with a lot of people. And I think a large component of what's contributing to poor conditions in our neighborhood is lack of outreach. There are an enormous amount of unmet needs, and a lot of them are basic social needs. Like over here in this part of the neighborhood, I didn't even get news of the events of the 22nd because I work full time. I don't use Facebook for mental health reasons. A lot of the people I know were extremely surprised to hear about it because they just don't free up the time to engage in the community on that level. And it pains me both to have to sell people 75-cent glasses of water at my job because we don't have people out distributing that kind of thing. And it pains me to know that like people are in danger out here because we're not talking to each other and, you know, spreading this kind of news organically and looking out for one another. You know, I have a neighbor who recently spent like 3 or 4 months just unengaged from the community because his brother got shot. And very few people even knew about it. They just knew that he wasn't on the corner anymore. And, you know, we have dozens and dozens of people like that, especially with COVID. I've been thinking more and more lately, it would be good to organize some kind of large outdoor events that can be open to everybody, let everybody communicate, possibly even tie it in with funneling people towards help through Measure 110, because I notice a lot of people don't know that the number is accessible without a police citation. And, you know, put services out every 2 weeks in like the Light of the World's church parking lot, somewhere like that, and have basically what amounts to a sober block party / potluck, just to funnel people towards communication, community, and help. That's my whole pitch.
Jacqueline, I'm totally sold on that concept. When I was out working with Historic Parkrose, one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing, and I know Annette and Brian and other folks continue to do to this day, is to organize community events like the street fairs, movies in the parks, the neighborhood cleanups. And the purpose of Taste of Parkrose wasn't necessarily to sell barbecues, although we did sell barbecues during those things. The real purpose behind that was to bring folks together, to get them outside of their houses, interacting with their neighbors. That is incredibly powerful. Especially in a neighborhood like Parkrose, which still faces a lot of infrastructure problems. One of the things that you can do right away is to build social capital to build the connections between neighbors and the community. So important. I've seen, when it works, I've seen it be transformative. I've seen blocks change just by virtue of getting people together. And I think you're also right to make that connection with COVID. One of the things that's happened since this pandemic has set upon us is that our street fairs disappeared for a little bit. Although I do want to do a plug for the street fairs, like the weekly street fairs that I think Historic Parkrose is sponsoring out there, really going back to the roots. I also will, I'm going to be referring to Annette a lot here. The Neighborhood Association is a great resource to find out what's happening in the community. So I would encourage everyone to plug into your neighborhood association meetings. I assume that those are happening online these days, so it's easier to attend than ever, and it's quite powerful. If there is a problem happening in the neighborhood, frankly, your neighborhood association and Historic Parkrose will be at the forefront of trying to get that problem solved. And I think we have also been poorly served by recent developments. The neighborhood association system has been in turmoil for a couple of years now. I think it's starting to settle down. And I'm actually hopeful that there'll be more resources heading. In fact, I know there are already more resources heading to neighborhood associations. So that'll be, I hope those folks will be able to be more active. And as the pandemic wanes, I hope that we'll be able to get outside again. But I also agree that the city plays a role here, especially through things like civic life and sponsoring events. We put a lot of dollars aside for that. So there are funds for that. Unfortunately, the pandemic has not been cooperating with us. So I think everyone who's trying to bring people together is struggling with the needs to continue the social distance. Go ahead, Jacqueline, you want to come back?
Well, one key element of this, actually, it ties to COVID because we'd be able to move a lot of services outdoors that normally exist in indoor spaces. And I really Measure 110 is a big deal. If we're going to start decriminalizing things, we need to offer people pathways. So what I have in mind is specifically something anyone can show up to.
Right.
Like I went to the last community market. It was wonderful. I spent $10 on some toys for my cats. Not everybody can participate in those kind of events.
No, I hear you. A thing which is important to remember is that the city is, we for the most part, we focus in on infrastructure things. We do parks and sewers and waters and whatnot. The county is sort of our partner on public health issues and health issues. So, and frankly, one of the things that Portland is always struggling with is trying to build a better working relationship with the county. But something which I think is true at both the city level and the county level is that we recognize the decades of underinvestment, essentially east of 82nd. And I think if you track the dollars, we're funneling more dollars out there. So that's promising. But I also know, as a guy who spent a lot of time picking up trash along Sandy Boulevard, and walking the district every day, I know that there are a lot of unmet needs there. But I think that the city kind of gets that, and there will be more resources there. And I have a personal commitment to your neighborhood to see Parkrose thrive. I think that when Parkrose is thriving, the entire city will thrive. And another thing which I think is important is a lot of Portlanders think of the Willamette River as being the center of the city, but if you actually take a look at the population center of the city, it's much closer to Parkrose. And until we kind of recognize that reality, our city's always going to be out of balance. And I get that. And frankly, once we get development and resources and strengthen the community out east of 82nd, that's going to help the whole city come into balance.
Well, I'm probably going to be organizing some of community events myself, so I'll stay in touch with y'all.
Well, please do. We'd love
Thank
that.
you.
If that's is one of your your contact in my office. And if you haven't made relationships with the neighborhood association, I encourage you to send the Parkrose Neighborhood Association an email.
Sorry for using so much of your time.
Oh, no. This is why we're here.
And I will drop my email contact in a minute so people have that to follow up with. So I do want to move on to Marcy and Dr. Paula. And then after you two go, I do have a couple questions in the chat. So I want to make room for those. And then I'll have another line of folks coming through. So Marcy, you are up.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Marcy.
Hi, I have two questions. The first one is, I'm curious as to why the neighborhood wasn't notified about this event moving. The only reason I knew about it is because I happen to follow a couple hate watch sites and social. But to my knowledge, the school wasn't notified, the neighborhood association wasn't notified, and the businesses in the surrounding areas weren't notified. And my second question, which I will preface by saying that I understand Twitter is not the gospel. A day or two after the event occurred, a woman had a thread, I believe she was a neighbor of Sam Adams, where she detailed a heated conversation that she had with him in the parking lot or something that ended with him implying that he was involved in having the event pushed out to our area. I'm curious if that has been discussed by the city and if anything has come of that. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Those are great questions. First, on the notification around the events or those events, I think the city screwed up there, or the city did screw up there. I apologize. I have talked to the mayor about this several times. Since then, the mayor tells me that they did reach out to the school district, but only like 2 hours beforehand. I've pointed out to the mayor that even, good that we reach out to the school district, but that's not enough. I've made it clear that we should also reach out to the neighborhood association and the business association. And one of the first points of consensus and reforms that we got out, and this has already actually been implemented, is that we've developed a system for notifying neighborhoods when we find out that things like this happen. So we have what's going to happen now is if I hear or someone, my staff hears that there's going to be a protest event in the neighborhood, we reach out to a specific sergeant, Sergeant Simpson in the city. He kind of helps manage all the protests. And then it's Sergeant Simpson's duty to reach out to the neighborhood association, the business association, the schools. That process was not in place 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, however long that was. That was a failing. It's also a lesson, and I think it's a lesson that we've learned and that we've implemented. I saw the thread around Sam too, and I frankly have not been able to get to the bottom of what happened there. I'm meeting again with the mayor tomorrow. One of the things that the mayor has told me that he is.
No one can
Sorry,
hear you.
Commissioner, I accidentally muted you.
Oh, that's all right. I think we're switching over to the Sam part. The Sam part, I hope that didn't happen. I haven't been able to get a straight answer. It's obviously unacceptable if it didn't happen. I'm meeting with the mayor again tomorrow to discuss exactly that. The mayor has assured me that one of the things that he has done in the wake of that event is he's directed the police department to do sort of a post-event autopsy to see what went wrong there and what went right there. One of the things I can tell you is that diverting the Proud Boys into a residential neighborhood is never an acceptable fix. I know Parkrose is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the city. It's also one of the most challenged neighborhoods in the city. That's an unacceptable strategy. And one of the things that I think has happened is that I think now there's at least a clear recognition that has been owned by certainly me, and I see the mayor as of today is in the same camp too, is that what happened out in Parkrose is unacceptable and cannot be repeated. He's asked the police department to come up with their evaluation of what happened and how to do things differently in the future. It's a tough discussion. I don't have any particularly good answers there. I think that the city strategy in terms of the Proud Boy Antifa, managing Proud Boy Antifa protests have almost never worked particularly well, and were just really disastrous out in Parkrose. I offer you my personal and professional apologies, partly because this is a neighborhood that I know in particular. It really pains me. But one of the things that I can assure you is that whatever happened a couple of weeks ago will not be repeated. And we are committed to learning lessons from that terrible melee and coming up with a better strategy.
Great. Well, I appreciate you having that continued conversation. And one maybe heartfelt sentiment that I would like to leave you with is that the feeling that I had coming out of that event, which I was very close to, did not jive at all with the messages that I read in the media the next day, with the mayor claiming how successful the weekend was. And I would just want you to take that to him, that we're part of Portland and we live here and we love our community, and we really don't want to be ignored in that way.
And I hear you 100%. And I have had this discussion with the mayor and his staff basically continually since then. And I think I have seen the mayor's, indeed, I think if you kind of check online today, you can see that the mayor's tone has changed. I think the mayor was focused in on managing the crisis downtown. And when that crisis didn't really happen, I think his thought was, well, that's a win. And it obviously wasn't a win. And I think that it took a week or two for that lesson to kind of seep into every office in City Hall. But the good news is that I think that even now, the mayor, as of today, and in fact, that's one of the headlines of the day, that the mayor has recognized that his strategy there didn't work, and he accepts responsibility for it. And I don't want to throw the mayor underneath the bus here, because there are 5 people on council and we all have a responsibility for maintaining public safety. And as a guy who's has deep roots in Parkrose, I feel a little bit ashamed of our performance, but I'm dedicated to getting it right. So please accept my apologies. Please know that we're working hard to make sure that that never happens again in Parkrose, and frankly in any other neighborhood.
Thank you, Marcy, for that question. I'm going to move on to Dr. Paula.
Hi there.
Hey, Paula.
Hi there. So I serve on the Oregon Cannabis Commission Research and Patient Care Subcommittees.
Great.
And I bring decolonizing methodologies to those platforms. We're creating new models and new systems with a decolonizing framework. I also live in Parkrose Heights, and some people consider that Parkrose and some people don't, although all of our children feed to the Parkrose High School and Middle School.
Yep.
What challenges me, I think there's a lot of things. There's an online discussion about grocery stores and access to food since the barn and Rossi has been taken out. But what's really pressing is, like, in my neighborhood, there's this camp that just can't get managed by the freeway across the street from homes. And children have to walk to school with that danger. So although I commend what's going on around 10 feet from this and 10 feet from that, that doesn't impact us directly. So on the Cannabis Commission, I work very closely. I'm a patient and I'm a researcher. And the most important thing I can do is create a patient-centered model where patients feel empowered to do something, that we are creating tools for them. We are creating empowerment for them. So I would like to sort of translate that to the neighborhood.
Okay.
The biggest complaints that I see online are, what can we do? We can't move the campers. Camping is legal. What can we do about making camping illegal in our neighborhoods? Why can't fences go up? If kids can't safely, my kids do not go to Parkrose. My daughter goes to De La Salle because I don't feel safe with her walking to high school.
Yeah.
Like, she's devastated that she can't go to school with her friends. And I, as a single parent, I can't take that risk. I don't know when a gunshot is going to fly by her, because we, like, you know, we hear gunshots all the time. So I feel like we in the community need tools or things that we can physically do immediately, besides calling into the reporter or getting online to the app, because it just seems to go in a pool. We get reports that things are getting cleared out, but then it grows again. And then the garbage and the rats and the this and the that. It's like, we keep focusing on the mayor not doing anything, or focusing on the city council not doing anything, but the model doesn't support that. So perhaps the city or the creators of innovating how we could do something about it need to include what we in the community can do. I'm constantly directing people to go to a meeting, go listen to the, you know, our meetings are public. You can ask questions at the end. I'm sure there's committees that you can participate in as a community member. We've got to find a way to give people tools, because we're going nuts dealing with it. And our kids my kids can't even go to Knott Park by themselves. I don't trust them walking the dog to the park, which is a block and a half from my house. And that sucks. So if there's anything that you can help our community with in terms of tools that we can take care of now, what power do we have as the people living in this crap? What power do we have to do something about it? Because I think the community morale would feel better about the city if we had some tools to do something about it immediately within our community. Thank you.
Paula, thanks for those comments. And I very much know exactly what you're talking about. Back when I was working at Historic Parkrose, one of the things that drove me crazy is the, you know, we have safe routes to schools in Parkrose, but, you know, many of them don't have sidewalks. Some of them go by, you know, lingerie modeling shops and houseless camps at this point. It's utterly unacceptable. It's one of the things that kind of motivated me to run for office. And I'm sad to see that it hasn't improved. I'd say a couple of things. One is, I hope the camp situation will begin to improve. During COVID, partly because of social distancing and other sort of public health concerns, we basically spent a year and a half where we were not moving along houseless camps. That has begun to change. So we do have teams out there both cleaning up litter and moving some of the especially high impact camps along. I also want to applaud your instinct to get involved. I think that works particularly well out in Parkrose. I've done dozens of events out there that are designed to help clean up. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is work with your neighborhood association or Historic Parkrose to organize community events. And you should be more empowered to get things done there than you ever have been. We just passed a recent budget, and one of the things we did in our recent budget is we put a ton more money on the scale of millions of dollars into dollars over at the Office of Civic Life to specifically kind of empower neighborhood associations and other community groups to go out and, you know, clean up graffiti, pick up trash, and do that sorts of events. So I'd encourage you to reach out to Annette, who wears a couple of different hats, to see what you can do if you wanted to get people together to pick up trash or do an anti-graffiti campaign. There should be resources for you to get that done. So those are some of the suggestions there. And indeed, I'll point out, I think that the city can and needs to be a good partner to Parkrose. But one of the keys to turning your neighborhood in particular around is to do that kind of social connections that you talked about. And I think Jacqueline kind of talked about it too, is Parkrose does best when neighbors work together. And frankly, when you do work together, the city will be there for you. And there are resources for cleanup. For cleanups, there are resources for anti-graffiti campaigns. I'd love to partner with you to kind of bring some events together and make this happen. You know, if you do a cleanup, I'll be out there. In fact, I think I was at a cleanup together at some point in the relatively recent past out in Parkrose. So anytime you see an event like that happening, and indeed, I'd encourage you to, if you're not already on the mailing list, to track some of the good works that are being done by your nonprofits, your neighborhood associations, your business districts, your school districts. If you get people involved, you'll make an immediate impact in the neighborhood. And it's not just about picking up the trash, although that's important too. It's about building the social connections between neighbors. And I think the social connections are actually more powerful than the sort of spray paint removal kits.
Thank you. It would be nice to know if we had a neighborhood association. I've lived here for 9 years, and there was one guy that used to do it who doesn't really live in the neighborhood, and we don't on our street have any connection to a neighbor. We don't even know if we have one.
Oh,
So
right, you're in Parkrose Heights.
Yeah, so we need to we need basic help. You know, I'm a single parent with 2 children. I volunteer for the Parkrose soccer club. You know, to go out and pick up garbage in a hazardous waste campsite is not something I feel safe doing, especially with my children. So I think we need some realistic, tangible tools that we can do. Not all of us can get together with the community in a group and do something. I think each individual has to their skills have to be tapped into, and what can we provide, but we also have to know what can we do. So I think it's, like you said, it's an ongoing conversation, and I appreciate this platform. And I hope that we have more conversations like this with you and the others. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And one of the things, Paula, if you give us your email, I'll have Yvette follow up with you and connect you to, I've lost track of what's happening with the Parkrose Heights Neighborhood Association. I assume they're out there doing good work, but we'll make sure that you get their information.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Paula. And for those who didn't see, I did drop a link to Civic Life's community safety program, where they actually offer trainings for neighborhoods, folks who want to, figure out how do you keep your neighborhood safe from theft and other things like that. So I did put that link there, but I also can send you a direct contact if you want to reach out in email, so connect you directly to staff there. I do want to acknowledge that it's 7:15, so we have 15 minutes. And as promised, this kind of conversation did evolve anyways, to talk about anything else that people have percolating that they really want to get answers to. And I do want to go back to one question that was in the chat regarding police. Yeah. And so one comment was, a police officer told me and my neighbors that there are only 2 officers patrolling from 99th to 181st at this time. They also told us they aren't pursuing theft crimes. You mentioned you're hiring more police for the side of town. Can you address this as how many are focusing on our area? Who is enforcing the safety and response in our neighborhood? And how close are we to actually figuring out what's going on with the contract for the police? And if the police are either refusing or unable to enforce the law, where are we placing our funding? So it's a lot of questions, but Commissioner, go for it.
Yes. On policing, and I'm going to use this as an opportunity to plug something which I didn't plug yet, but I think especially if you're dealing with localized crime in your neighborhood or at your business, a thing that you can do now that frankly wasn't really on the table for the past year or so is to reach out to the crime prevention office over in the Office of Civic Life. Those folks were they'll work with you to do things like crime prevention through environmental design. They'll actually train you about how to keep your neighborhood safer. During COVID, they were sort of on hiatus, but I used to be a supervisor over there, and I'm happy to say that they have recovered from a lot of their problems, and they're engaging in the community again. So
As this was my question, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as this was my question, I have contacted the Community Civic Life, and they told me this was a police enforcement issue.
Sure, yeah.
Not that
Yep.
they are trying to be in more contact with them, and they used to have a better relationship, but they are no longer in a good relationship with the police, and they're not choosing to do enforcement.
Yes, and I'm sure that's true too. And I want to get to the policing part of your question because it's right on track. I will tell you, in terms of the police staffing numbers that you brought up, maybe 2 police cars patrolling, all of East Portland. That has been the case for years. Back when I used to work at 111th and Sandy, during the day, it would not be uncommon for there to just be 1 or 2 police cars patrolling all of the city east of 82nd. It's a sign of the fact that our police department is dangerously understaffed. For a city our size, you'd expect us to have about 1,100 police officers. Right now, we're about 800 police officers. We struggle mightily to just literally fill minimum staffing requirements to have any cops in every region of the city. We're not doing well enough. Right now, I think we have the new budget calls for about 53 new police officers, if I'm recalling that number correctly. At the same time, we also have cops retiring at a fast clip. So even though we're bringing on more cops this year, I expect that a year from now, we will have even fewer cops than we have today. That's unacceptable, and it's dangerous, and it's a dynamic that we need to change. One of the things that we'll be doing here on City Council in the next couple of months is a thing called the fall bump, where we essentially adjust budgets before the end of the fiscal year to address sort of emerging community needs. One of the emerging community needs that I see is the fact that we need to bring more police officers online. I'm working with the mayor to develop a proposal to hire basically recently retired police officers so that at least we can stabilize. It's my personal goal to try to basically stabilize the size of the police department this year. And then begin to grow it. If we are short 400 cops, which is probably about what it is, one of the realities is that we are not going to be able to hire 400 cops a year. We're not going to be able to hire even 100 cops a year. But trying to hire about 50 cops a year is about the bandwidth that we have. And I want to make sure that we begin to get on track to get that done. And I think the politics in City Council is beginning to shift in that direction. So that is the truth. I think the good news is that things will start to stabilize. I think relatively soon, and then I hope that we'll get better. One of the things that we've done since I've gotten on this council is that we've created a special police unit that focuses specifically on gun violence. And that's important, but the fact that gun violence continues to be out of control suggests to me that we have to try a new strategy. And one of the new strategies that I want to challenge my colleagues on council to embrace is to also develop a police unit that focuses specifically on preventing gun violence before it happens. Right now, we're focusing on gun crimes after bullets fly. That's going to be a challenging debate, but I think it's just time. Partly this is important because probably about half of the gun violence we see right now is gang violence, and the shootings, and you can see it if you know Parkrose and see the patterns of shootings. It's clearly retaliatory violence. And in order to kind of break those vicious cycles, we have to do early intervention. So those are some of the things that we're working on. You don't have to convince me that we're under-policed because we are. I'm not surprised to hear that the officers said that they are, triaging the kinds of crimes that they respond to. I find that unacceptable, and one of the things that I'm fighting hard against is to have that become the norm. But I do think that there's some things that we can do and will help. I think I mentioned that I'm the commissioner in charge of BOIC 911. So I have this unique real-time view of our public safety situation in Portland. And I'll tell you, over at BOIC, we deal with about 1 million 911 or non-emergency calls a year. About half of those essentially deal with houselessness. So we have cops responding to, a mentally ill person who lives on the street and is acting out in some way that is threatening. Ultimately, if we're going to triage crimes, one of the things I want to do is get the cops out of that business. And instead of having cops respond to those crimes, I want to get Portland Street Response to respond to those crimes. But there's good news there. Portland Street Response, as you probably know, we've been doing a pilot project over in Lentz for about the past 6 months. This month, we'll have 2 reports, one from an outside set of evaluators, and one is an internal document developed by our public safety community, which will evaluate how well Portland Street Response is working. And they'll also offer us advice in terms of how to expand the program. I follow this closely enough to know that Portland Street Response is working well enough to expand. I think one of the communities that I expect it to expand into sooner than later, and by sooner than later, I hope that means within the next 8 months or so. I hope that we can see that new resource out in Parkrose. So if we have Portland Street Response out in Parkrose, a lot of the houselessness and mental health crimes that either cops are currently responding to or no one is responding to, we'll finally have some teams out there to address that. So that is some good news, which I think is coming soon. And Yvette, I don't mind going a little bit longer. I'd be happy to, I'll keep answering questions until I wear people out.
Okay. In that case, Patrick, I know you had a lot of questions, including in the chat. So if you just pick the one that's most pertinent to you, and then from there we'll move on to Aaron and Brian Atkinson. You've had your hand up for a little bit too. So go ahead, Patrick.
Hi, and thank you for having this meeting. I really appreciate it. And
sure,
neighborhood, we've had a lot of struggles and strife here. But I think most pertinent to our neighborhood at the Riverwood community here in Argay has been gang activity here on 125th Place. We've had numerous taggings on our buildings. The most recent one was 2 weeks ago where they tagged declaring boundaries and whatnot. But then for the tagging, he shot off a full clip, eight rounds, to announce that he just tagged, and it was right outside my window.
Oh my God.
In that same week, my patio, I looked out over the corner, there was a man shot right on the corner, 125th and Shaver, which I'm guessing is gang related. That's why the tagging occurred just a few days later. What is being done about gang activity specifically outside of your gun violence activity? Anything being done? I mean, there's information that you read the tagging and it's East Side Longos versus some other gang.
Yeah.
Is there any gang task force working out there?
I'll tell you the truth, Patrick. I mean, there's some policing done, but one of the things that previous councils did is essentially to dismantle the police task force that we had that focused in on gangs and especially gang violence. I think that was it. I think the evidence shows that was clearly a mistake. Probably half of the shootings that we see right now, especially the deadly shootings, are clearly gang related. I will also tell you, from my interactions with public safety people and people who do outreach to gang members, they know that we got rid of the gang task force, and that has allowed them space to thrive. That's an error our council made, and frankly, they made it because they were afraid that the previous policies were racist. Our gang task force picked up a disproportionate number of African American men. They were very concerned about that. And I'm concerned, as a single Black dad with like a 11-year-old and a 10-year-old boys, I'm concerned about racism in policing too. On the other hand, as a single dad of 11 and 10-year-old boys, I'm awfully concerned about gun violence and stray bullets and whatnot. And I'm not afraid to say that Portland has a gang problem. I can also tell you that not everyone on city council agrees that we have a gang problem. Indeed, I think that we have passed rules that say that we essentially cannot say the word gang out loud because of the stigmatizing aspect of that. Part of my work on council now is to talk to my colleagues to address the fact that there clearly is a gang problem here in Portland. You can see it. I follow especially the deadly shootings in all over Portland, but especially in Parkrose. And you can just tell by the locations and the timing of the shootings that these are tit for tat retaliatory shootings. And they happen partly because literally the gang members know that there's not, there are only two cop cars east of 82nd. I can tell you. Yep. And they know that. And I've lost track of how many shootings we currently, or how many homicides we've had in Portland at this point. I'm sure we're up in the high 60, or homicides we've had.
Heard that they prop gun sales and drug sales as well. Yep. That's the only thing that keeps them apprised, keeps them thriving. There's no answer.
Yeah, well, there has to be an answer. This isn't acceptable, and until there is some intervention, and I believe in prevention. One of the first things I did on council is, I worked with my colleagues to set aside about $5 million to do violence prevention work. And I think that's really important. At the same time, too, you have to address the reality, which is that we have gangs in Portland. They're literally in Portland because they know that we have a weak law enforcement system, and we have a
huge drug market.
A huge drug market, and also we have very lenient sentences. So if you want to shoot somebody, Portland is a great place to shoot somebody. Vancouver is much worse because the laws in Vancouver are stricter. And we just, one of my debates, and if you want to really help with the politics here, is reach out to members of council and let them know that at least in your neighborhood you see a gang violence problem. And encourage them to do something about it. I think that we actually have to do both, the soft side of prevention, which is, outreach, after school programs and whatnot.
I have to tell you, the talk of the town is an actual neighborhood watch with, CCL.
And those work. I used to be a supervisor over at the crime prevention program in civic life. One of the things that we did was we did neighborhood watches under the person who had sat in the seat before me. She got rid of those because she felt like they were stigmatizing and whatnot. As the guy who actually managed that program, I disagree with that. I don't right now. Commissioner Hardesty is in charge of the crime prevention program. So I don't know what's happening with Neighborhood Watch. I know she remains skeptical of it, if not downright opposed. If you think that that's something that would be helpful and you want the city's help with it, the key is to talk to Commissioner Hardesty's office and let them know what your lived experience is.
Great.
Thank you, Patrick. So I want to acknowledge it's 7:30, 7:31, and the commissioner is being very gracious and said he could stay for a little bit longer. So I'm going to say 10 more minutes max.
Sure.
And I want to give the floor to Aaron Blue and then Brian Atkinson.
Hey, Aaron.
Hey, nice to meet you. So I've been a resident of Argay for 12 years. Love the neighborhood. Love the community. Also glad to hear that you're a commissioner with some roots here. Definitely helps kind of with empathy to what's going on.
Yeah.
But I definitely have some concerns. So, if the Portland Police Bureau was all hands on deck and, the plane was circling my house here in Argay, observing the situation, but we've got a gentleman brandishing a firearm down the middle of 122nd, chasing people who are trying to go back to their cars, who are counter protesting. What's the criteria for taking action? And, this happened weeks ago, but there are still no specific feedback or comments you have from the mayor about the situation, and that doesn't seem to match the gravity of the situation. I have two more kind of questions to follow up on that as well. The second one question is, who's accountable for such a gross mishandling of such a situation? I agree that, as city commissioners, you're all accountable for helping our citizens feel safe in the streets. And, we shouldn't feel like we're subject to the whims of a far right, gang or terrorist group, whatever you choose to call them. The fact that there's even a question that one of our city commissioners might have plausibly said, you should be glad I sent them to Parkrose, doesn't feel inclusive, doesn't feel like the city that I want to be a part of. And finally, I'm asking these questions because I want to be confident that I am not wasting my time, and that I shouldn't be devoting more of my time and energy and money to working to flush the whole city council, because I think there is an accountability that needs to happen, and I'd love to learn more about what's going to happen there. Thank you.
Absolutely great questions, Aaron. Let me address the weapons piece first. I believe in most of those situations, the weapons we saw were airsoft guns, which sure as heck look like weapons, but under Oregon law, those are viewed as toys. They're clearly not toys. And taking airsoft weapons out and pointing them at people and shooting them at people, I find utterly unacceptable. It's one of the poisonous things that we're seeing in a lot of protests. Currently, it's legal, which shocks the hell out of me.
Sure. There was also a gentleman with a pistol that was not an airsoft pistol. I mean, hopefully that's on your radar at this point by now. But
the actual weapon is something which I hadn't heard about. I will literally bring that up with the mayor.
I'll send you guys an email as well. I've got
okay, that's great.
Sure.
If you got you probably have Yvette's contact information in the chat. Specifically, one of my responses to the Parkrose incident is to actually begin drafting legislation to make it illegal to brandish and point airsoft weapons at people in public spaces. That actually is going well. I'm deeply committed to actually getting that written into law, and I believe we will get that written into law shortly. These things take time, but this will take weeks to months as opposed to years. I think that's an important step to restoring order to the street. Now, in terms of accountability in these situations, I think it's important for me not to throw my colleagues underneath the bus. But in our form of government, everyone's in charge of a specific bureau. And by tradition, the mayor is in charge of the police bureau. And the mayor designed the strategy and made the basic choices around how to deploy the police department on that day. So if you're, so if you're looking for a direct line of accountability, it starts with the mayor. And I think if you read some of the press that came out today, I think the mayor has recognized that that was his call. It did not work out. It was not a good plan. He's put together a team in the police bureau to evaluate what's going on, and we'll get a set of recommendations out of that. And I can tell you, I look forward to that report with interest, and I will hold the city accountable for implementing reforms. And we already have. Like, one of the things even before Sunday was over, I was on the phone with the mayor's staff trying to do reforms. And one of the reforms that we already got is, let's at least come up with a system to communicate with neighborhoods when we figure out how that happens. I'm your water guy, I'm your sewer guy, I'm your 911 guy, and there are issues all over there. So, that's the stuff that I'm directly accountable for. There's also no way in which I can wash my hands of the failures of the police department. People will hire me to ultimately hire me to keep their neighborhoods safe. And I recognize that we did not keep Parkrose safe the other day.
So what's your message to the mayor when you meet with him tomorrow?
First, when I meet with him tomorrow, we have been struggling to get to the point to recognize the failures that happened. The fact that there was a failure. And I think as of today, we had a real breakthrough where the mayor has owned it. But like what happened in Parkrose was not a success. And so that's progress. And he's charged the police bureau with coming up with a report. We need to have that happen. The other thing that I'm pressing the mayor on is we're going to do the fall bump, which is this budgeting thing where we can shuffle some dollars around. When I do that, one of the things I'm going to tell him is that it's incredibly important that we invest and hire new cops before the end of this calendar year. And I think that we can actually get that done by hiring recent retirees. The other thing that I'm going to tell the mayor that we must do is that we must develop a police unit that is specifically focused on preventing gun crime. You know, right now we have a special unit that's focused on responding to gun crime. But if we want to prevent gun crime, that means a different set of strategies. It looks probably much closer to some of the work that the Gang Enforcement Task Force used to do. And given the number of shootings that we see and the fact that mass shootings have become sort of the new norm, and basically we see a homicide every 2 or 3 days in Portland, we just have to recognize that the choices that we have made in the past are not working. And frankly, I think a majority of council recognizes that now. Probably not everybody in council agrees with that, but that's my assessment of where we're at. And I think that, you know, we need more police, we need to expand Portland street response, and we need to focus specifically on the gang violence that we see out on the streets. And I think I'm looking for 2 other members of council who agree with me on that and have the courage to vote along those lines. I'm optimistic, but I will tell you it's a debate.
Thanks.
Thank you, Patrick. Next is Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Hi, Mingus. Good to see you.
How you doing?
Cell phone. I'm doing good. I have a little girl.
Oh.
So I'll try to be brief. Thanks for doing this. I know you're kind of taking the heat for what really wasn't your policy, and you've said a few times you don't want to throw your colleagues under the bus. And my goal isn't to dump on Ted Wheeler, but in this instance, specifically pertaining to his leadership and direction of our police bureau, I'm mad. And I'm going to start there and say, I'm reading on my computer. One, I don't think that Ted Wheeler should direct the police. The first reason is that he has a track record that's long enough at this point, and he's been unsuccessful. We're suffering because of his policies and his lack of leadership. And I don't have a solution, but I think it's clear Ted Wheeler doesn't have solutions for us, and he should not be directing our police force at all. Another reason, aside from him just being inept at it, is that his political motivations are compromising the policies he's making. And he patted himself on the back about the response on August 22nd and said it was a success. He was championing himself. And then today you said that he backtracked that, and I just pulled up the article because I hadn't read it yet, but he said that he was pilloried by the national media and the public outcry. And that isn't how public policy and police action is measured. Whether something was successful or not should have nothing to do with what the media says about it. It's measured in the trauma and the lack of safety that we have in our community. And it's clear that Ted Wheeler doesn't understand that because of his public comments about that. And it shows that his measurement of success has nothing to do with our thriving or our safety. It has to do with his public perception. So that leads me to say, I also don't think that Joanne Hardesty should lead our police. And I don't think that any mayor or city commissioner should have any direction of our police force, which references what some of what you were just saying, leading to charter reform. I know that's I'm probably not saying so much you disagree with on just that position, but and I'm kind of trailing off, but it's not just Ted Wheeler that shouldn't direct the police, it's the whole mayor, because anyone in that position has political motivations and really is not equipped to do that. I mean, I don't know that any mayor really has the expertise to handle these type of situations that we're dealing, not just on August 22nd in Parkrose, but the even way more severe riot, protest, everything that's happened throughout our city in the last 2 years. It's not something that should be on his job description. So I know we're running late, so I'm just going to stop there.
Brian, I agree with you. One of the ironies here is that the mayor is also the person who assigns bureau assignments. And so historically what's happened is that the mayors always keep that assignment, partly because it's such a volatile bureau that if it goes south, the mayor still gets charged with it. I've had this exact discussion with the mayor within the last week, and he is not giving the bureau up. And ultimately, I think your analysis of what the fix is exactly right. Our current form of government, this commission form of government, where I'm essentially the mayor of the Water Bureau and the Sewer Bureau and 911, and Hardesty is the mayor for the Fire Bureau and Civic Life, and the mayor is in charge of the Police Bureau, is literally insane. And the only fix there is charter reform. The good news is that the Charter Reform Committee is working. This is a citizens group. You actually got a couple of members from Parkrose actually on that committee. One of the things I'd encourage you to do is to track that process. I know it's their plan to send a ballot measure to the people in November of 2022. And what we'll do, they haven't come up with their plan yet, but I'm pretty sure their plan is going to suggest that we move toward more traditional form of government or a more modern form of government, where we have a city manager who basically is dealing with all these nuts and bolts stuff and is much less subject to the criticism received by the public. But if I had any message to any, or one of the messages I have to everyone in the room, regardless of all the challenges that we faced, literally all of them can be traced back to our form of government, where we've divided power amongst power in the city amongst 5 different city commissioners. And if they don't work well together or they are not up to the job, we fail. And the fix for that is at the ballot box, both in terms of voting for charter reform when it's on the November 22 ballot, and choose wisely as you cast your ballot for members of city council. The next round of races I see are starting to heat up. There's some new candidates that are throwing their hat in the ring as recently as today. And if you want to see change, elections have consequences.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm stepping in at 7:45.
Can I just do Jenny real quick? I see your hand up. I promise I'll do it quick, and then we'll let everyone go have a drink.
Okay, before that though, I do want to say that I'm leaving another link in case we didn't get to your questions. That is our office contact page on City Hall. I mentioned this, but I think it got buried in the chat. I am going to be out part of the week, so you can just email the MAPS office at portlandoregon.org to get it to our constituent services rep, and they can work on that while I am out. And before it gets too late, I do want to shout out Annette. Thank you so much for helping us organize this. I think the conversations, have been really great. And I also want to acknowledge and shout out Superintendent Michael Lopez Ceros. He is currently in the room absorbing all of his information, and thank you for your executive assistant, Amanda. I might not have her name properly, but she also helped communicate this. So just want to get those thank yous out the door and contact information. And after you have your last correspondence with Jenny, we'll sign off. Thanks, everyone.
And Jenny, we'll let you close out the night. What are you thinking about today?
Thank you, Commissioner Maps. I think that everyone had great points, valid points. They're a part of this community and the community surrounding this community. I think that their voices should be heard and also reflected in your conversations with the mayor. So please, highlight some of the things that are concerning to these neighbors, because it also rings true for neighbors, again, in East Portland and other communities. I also wanted to highlight that I know there should be a meeting for you, Commissioner Maps, coming up soon when it comes to our water bureau with working with Clackamas County with that whole plan. And I'm hoping that you can also set aside some time in a conversation with Clackamas County about our public safety here in Portland, because they're facing some challenges. They have in certain areas combated the challenges that some of these neighbors are talking about in specific cities in Clackamas County, where they don't have this camping issue. And they have found housing for the neighbors that were camping in the beginning when it just came to Oregon in general. So just please building that relationship and that conversation with them on the side, since you're going to be working with them closely with that water project. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jenny. I promise you I'll reach out to our partners over in Clackamas County, both on the water issue and the public safety issues and the houselessness issues. And I think your messages to me, your messages and the messages that everyone has shared with me today, I promise you I will take to my check-in with the mayor tomorrow. I also want to just extend my, frankly, apologies to the people of Parkrose and East Portland for the incident that happened a couple of weeks ago. That's not the kind of government that you deserve. And it's unacceptable. And it's one of my jobs to make sure that, first, that never happened. And I can't do anything about what has happened, but I promise you that I will work every day to make sure that that never happens again. And I'll make you one other promise, which was I will invite you all together, or invite you to invite me to come and speak with you in a couple of months. I'll give you an update in terms of what's happening and give you and see how Parkrose is doing. Like you, I love Parkrose, and I think when the city of Portland will not thrive until we get Parkrose right. And so thank you for all the work that you're doing to make your neighborhood thriving and connected. We're a partner for you, so anytime you need some help, please reach out. And I also want to do a plug to my friend and colleague, Annette Stanhope, over at the Neighborhood Association and Historic Parkrose. They do amazing work in terms of strengthening neighborhoods. So if you're looking for a way to get involved in Parkrose, literally sending Annette a call or an email is one of the smartest and most efficient things you can do. And with that, let me release you into the night. Thank you so much for joining me. Stay well, stay safe, and I look so forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Aloha.
Thank you. Aloha. I like that.